WT, the Clive James Show tonight at 10:20, following the news from ITN.
From the studios of ITN, the news with Anya Sitharan.
Good evening, welcome to the programme. Tonight's headlines: new setback for Tories as Minister resigns over claims of an extramarital affair. Peace with security, Israel's new leader's promise to his people. And 50 years on, Heathrow celebrates with an air spectacular. The Welsh Office Minister Rod Richards resigned today, hours after a newspaper published allegations that he'd had an extramarital affair. Mr Richards has refused to comment. Downing Street issued a terse statement saying his resignation had been accepted. The president of the Welsh Conservative Party said Mr Richards brought this on himself. John Draper reports.
Rod Richards was today refusing to comment on his resignation, the latest of a string of ministers to go in sex scandals. He left his home pursued by the media only to get stuck in traffic. His resignation was much speedier. Previous ministers involved in scandals have hung on. These days the Prime Minister insists they go quickly. His alleged affair with Julia Feldhaus, a public relations officer, has left Welsh Tories stunned.
It doesn't do us any good, it does us harm, but we do survive in spite of these shortcomings.
And in Mr Richards' Clwyd North West constituency, questions are being asked about his future as the local MP.
Well, there's been enough, how shall I say, sleaze gone on. We don't want any more. And it distresses me greatly to think that this has happened. I am going to call for a meeting of the Executive Committee to try and discuss this and see what we can do to take any further action we find necessary.
Mr Richards, here electioneering with his wife, had a reputation for being abrasive. He had to apologise for calling Labour slimy and corrupt. Opponents dubbed him the Rottweiler.
I think that's what has caused so many problems for him personally, and that's why I think there will be such little sympathy for him now he's in this difficult situation.
Mr Richards' prompt resignation has minimised embarrassment to the government, but Conservatives had hoped that after a relatively scandal-free year or so, they'd put the sleaze issue behind them. This isn't the sort of thing they want in the run-up to a general election. John Draper, ITN, Westminster.
Israel's new Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has delivered his first speech since his election victory. He went on live television to say he stretched out his arms to all his neighbours. Here's our Middle East correspondent, Robert Moore.
It was a tumultuous welcome for Israel's incoming Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu arriving for an evening victory rally tonight in Jerusalem. A moment to savour his triumph, but also to try and heal the deep rifts in Israel, a country this election has shown to be so deeply divided. There is no mistaking the right wing is back in power. Former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir was here. So was General Sharon, blamed by many for the Lebanon war. He will now sit in the new cabinet. Mr. Netanyahu said that bringing Israelis together was his main mission. He invited Arab countries to search for what he called peace with security, but said little more that will comfort the Arab world. When he tried to thank Mr. Peres for his contribution, large numbers of the audience shouted abuse. The defeated Prime Minister was holding one of his last cabinet meetings. Ministers reluctantly agreed to postpone Israel's troop withdrawal from Hebron, knowing that the new government opposes an immediate pullout. In Gaza, Yasser Arafat, on his way to London, said he accepted Israel's democratic choice and even walked holding the hands of two Israeli policemen in a gesture of goodwill. Although many in the PLO are in a state of despair, others argue the whole peace process is irreversible. The real question is whether Netanyahu will feel free to abandon some of his hard-line election promises. Robert Moore, ITN, Jerusalem.
The Agriculture Minister, Douglas Hogg, is on his way to Luxembourg tonight on his latest mission to try to get the ban on British beef relaxed. The Prime Minister held a special cabinet meeting this afternoon to discuss the government's tactics. Our political correspondent, Jackie Ashley, reports.
The Prime Minister and Mrs Major left for a private engagement after an emergency meeting of the Special Beef Committee called to put the final touches to the government's propaganda offensive. Ministers agreed a 200-page plan, including a mass slaughter of cattle, to take to the Europeans.
There's a lot of hard work to be done, which we will be carrying forward over the next few days.
The Agriculture Minister, Douglas Hogg, was heading straight for Luxembourg. At the Agriculture Council there tomorrow, he hopes to get the ban on beef derivatives lifted. On Tuesday, Malcolm Rifkind will be at the European Commission in Brussels. From there, Mr Rifkind and Mr Hogg will embark on a tour of 6 European capitals. Ministers were insisting the policy of non-cooperation in Europe goes on until agreement on lifting the ban is reached.
Once we've got agreement, and at the moment, you see, the European Union, at least some of the nations in the European Union, are not even sensibly and rationally discussing this issue with us. But once we've got that agreement, then the policy of non-cooperation can end overnight.
More than 10 weeks since the beef ban was imposed, there's still little sign that it's about to be lifted. Ministers are hoping that by raising the stakes on the non-cooperation policy and on the diplomatic front, they may make some progress at last. Jackie Ashley, ITN, in Downing Street.
Police in the Irish Republic said tonight that a fire which killed a mother and 5 of her children appears to have been a tragic accident. 3 other children are still in hospital after they were injured in the blaze at Portarlington in County Laois. John Ray reports.
Smouldering remains are all that's left of the family's home. Their terrace house now a burnt-out shell. The dead, Bridie Marr and 5 of her children, 9-year-old Joanna and her sister Fiona, aged 6. Another daughter, aged 2, a 12-year-old boy and a grown-up son of 26. The tragedy has stunned neighbours who could only watch the flames, unable to help.
They were a young family. You know, it's really very sad.
I was devastated because nothing like that ever happened up here before, you know, like you come down and you find out about your next door neighbours being burnt to death.
Investigators are searching the debris for clues to the cause of the fire. 3 other sons are in hospital, 1 critically ill. Their father, who raised the alarm, was alone in escaping the flames unhurt. John Ray, ITN.
The US Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, has warned the Serbian president that sanctions could be reimposed unless 2 Bosnian Serb leaders wanted for war crimes are removed from power. Mr Christopher told Slobodan Milosevic that Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic must stand trial in The Hague. The Royal Mail said today a postal strike isn't inevitable in spite of an overwhelming vote in favour by its employees. Nearly 70% of members of the Communication Workers Union who voted want industrial action. Our business editor, Mark Webster, reports.
Overwhelming support for action among Royal Mail's 138,000 postal workers has increased pressure on the company to improve its offer. If not, a national postage strike is a clear possibility.
Postmen and women do not want to go out on strike, but they recognise that this is a last resort, if you like, to end the problems that are endemic in our industry.
I don't think industrial action is at all inevitable in this situation. The important thing is that we get back round the table now with the union so that we can sort out about our differences and get this thing settled.
The union wants a shorter 5-day working week and improved basic pay. In return, Royal Mail wants greater flexibility from its workforce. Talks will start next week, aimed at resolving this dispute. While both sides are far apart, particularly on the issue of new work practices, they also both recognise that if the first national postal strike for 8 years goes ahead, it could have extremely serious consequences for the post office. Mark Webster, ITN, Blackpool.
The world motor racing champion Michael Schumacher won the Spanish Grand Prix in atrocious conditions today. Britain's Damon Hill was one of the race's many casualties. He spun for the 3rd time on the 11th lap. He wasn't hurt, but was unable to continue. Finally, thousands of people looked to the skies today as Heathrow Airport celebrated its 50th birthday with a spectacular air display. Our South of England correspondent Robert Hall watched it.
From Heathrow's empty skies, they turned back the clock. A procession of veterans spanning 50 years of passenger transport. Among the mud and tents of 1946, recreated this weekend, today's international airport would have seemed pure fantasy.
No buildings, only tents, and 1 plane an hour coming in.
But within a decade, a massive development was underway. Famous faces, a sure sign of Heathrow's growing status. Half a century on, Heathrow Airport is still growing. 54,000 people now work here. That's the equivalent of a city the size of Hereford. And annual passenger figures total 54 million. Dramatic change reflected by today's flypast, as propeller gave way to jet, ushering in a new era of mass transportation, which could push back Heathrow's boundaries still further. Then, to the delight of enthusiasts, a final tribute from pilots civilian and military, with an aircraft that represents another milestone in civil aviation. Robert Hall, ITN, Heathrow.
That's it from all of us on the Weekend Team. Good night.
Hello, good evening. From Tuesday onwards, the weather looks set to be dry, fairly sunny and very, very warm, even hot by the end of the week. But the next 24 hours are far more unsettled. There's a weather system to come into the west. It's going to bring outbreaks of rain. Most of it will fall in the north and west. You can see how things are shaping up on the satellite pictures. Today we've had showery outbreaks of rain and some good clear spells. This is the clear weather that will come across us overnight tonight. But just to the west, that's the weather system that will bring rain across the north and west mostly, a few spots further south and east. Let's look at tonight then in more detail. The showers that are around now are gradually dying away, but that next lot of rain will come into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland during the second half of the night. In the east, as you can see, clear skies, temperatures down to 5, perhaps a touch of ground frost. Tomorrow morning then, the rain still in the west to begin with, and it will be moving north and east through the day, across Scotland, northern England, into western parts of England and Wales too. The heaviest rain, though, always in the far northwest. The further south and east you are, the best chance you have of staying completely dry. And top temperatures, 19 in the south, 15 or 16 in the north. Good night.
Sponsored by PowerGen, generating electricity, whatever the weather. Step into summer with style. Join GMTV for a special season devoted to looking good and feeling cool, no matter what the weather brings. Starting tomorrow with an exclusive interview, up close and personal with the glamorous Michelle Pfeiffer.
Step into summer, weekdays on GMTV.
LWT weather sponsored by First Choice Holidays for a brighter outlook.
Good evening. Tonight in the LWT region will be dry. Lows of around about 5 Celsius. That's right out in the sticks, warmer in and around London. Now Monday morning gets us off to a fine start to the week. Plenty of sunshine around and light winds too. But by the afternoon, cloud building up, so it will be quite cloudy. And there is a chance of a light shower towards the end of the afternoon or early evening. Temperatures 19 Celsius, 66 Fahrenheit. Have a very good week. That's all the weather from me. Good night.
For a detailed forecast, call Weather Update, sponsored by First Choice Holidays on 0891 11 0000.